My name is Wynand van der Merwe. I'm the Skills Development Manager at the NCPC SA. And I must admit to many of my friends amongst the audience that I feel a little bit like an expectant father today with the launch of this initiative. Many of you know how long we've been talking about getting this off the ground. So finally the day has arrived, and it's my honor to present the concept to you. And we have 5 panel members that will also participate in the discussion to justify what we are busy with and why we need to drive this forward. So I hope that you're going to find this session quite illuminating. To start off with, I just want to remind you of exactly why we are here. So what is the environment, the landscape that we find ourselves in, or that you find yourselves in as RECP practitioners in South Africa? I identified 3 major categories of stakeholders. First of all, there's government that issues regular legislation and regulations which you guys need to take responsibility of implementing. The landscape that you find yourselves in has so many practitioners that claim to be specialists, knowledgeable about how to facilitate the implementation of the relevant legislation. Many of them actually don't. And by doing business the way they do, it affects your reputation and your credibility in the marketplace. Government, on the other hand, relies on efficient rollout of its legislation and regulations. Without skilled practitioners that can realize that expectation, much of the legislation will fail to a certain degree. On the other hand, we have industry that needs to comply to legislation. They need to submit energy plans. They need to subject themselves to carbon tax. Without qualified, experienced practitioners to guide them in doing that, they will always be frustrated. And then lastly, but perhaps more importantly, there are the practitioners yourselves. Either you're employed by large corporates, or you function as consultants, but you have to operate in this space. And your clients look up to you for them to achieve their goals and objectives. Even government expects you to do your job well so that they can achieve their priorities. So within this landscape, there is something missing, which we hope to address by establishing, for a start, and for now, let's call it an RECP Peer Recognition Association. But let's do that with a clear understanding that the ultimate goal where we aim to get to is the actual establishment of a professional body that looks after the professionalization of any and all RECP careers. That means if you work in the area of sustainability, environmental sustainability, climate change mitigation, energy efficiency, water efficiency, waste management, carbon, to name but a few. If you are measurement and verification professionals, this is the space where you operate in. And this body intends to formalize the structure or the infrastructure within which you can operate as professionals recognized by government, by industry, and amongst yourselves, where you can compete fairly with one another, knowing full well that your competitors have similar or the same skill sets as you, and they are not making vague promises to your clients and destroying your credibility in the process. So we are hoping to establish this body to play that very role. Now, for those of you who do not necessarily know the details of how professional bodies are formed and how they are supposed to function, allow me to just make the following observation, which will be substantiated by one of our panel members later. The fact is that a professional body is restricted to a well-defined sector. The entity in South Africa that's responsible for the registration of professional bodies happens to be the South African Qualifications Authority. One of their tasks is to ensure that there are no professional bodies that overlaps. And in that respect, I can assure you, I've done all the research necessary to determine whether our profession can be covered within the existing mandate of any of the existing professional bodies. And it can't. A professional body has a very clearly demarcated area of responsibility. And it's not as easy as just as new careers develop to bring them under the existing umbrellas. And for RECP practitioners in its broadest sense, that covers all the disciplines implied in what I've mentioned: environmental, sustainability, climate change mitigation, resource efficient and cleaner production practices. There are no existing professional body that can take responsibility to protect the professional credibility of RECP practitioners. Hence the necessity for us to take charge and establish one. See me as a little bit of a coach, I suspect, because I'm here to motivate you to take charge of your own destiny, to become part of this entity that determines your own standards of practice, code of conduct, etc., that establishes your identity as professionals in whatever discipline within the broader RECP space you practice in. This entity will belong to you, the practitioners. That is the intention with this. You will be governing yourselves in a way that allows for the achievement of the aim and objectives of government, industry, and your professional selves. Right now, at this point in time, I'm suggesting that we consider following a thematic approach. But again, this is the launch of this initiative. From here onwards, you need to select from amongst yourselves a few trusted individuals that will participate as a, for the lack of a better term, let's call them a board of sorts, to take charge and formulate the environment within which you see this body operating, the parameters within which, or according to which this body must operate. These are decisions that you have to take, understanding your area of specialization, the needs of your prospective clients out there, your customers, your stakeholders. And right now, to me, it made sense to follow a thematic approach. You may feel differently further down the line and change that approach. But I thought that it would make sense to categorize the core themes or the focus areas as water, materials and waste, energy, carbon, mostly because of the carbon tax legislation, and measurement and verification as the core, let's call them chambers of this professional body. And just to give you another context to consider, I'm presenting this to you as one of the possible ways to implement and go forward. Allow me to make a few assumptions and make comparisons between what this entity will become and what EXA, for example, is. EXA, different from this body, happens to be a statutory entity, which means that they were called into existence by an act of parliament. But that doesn't distinguish it in any significant way in terms of the normal roles and responsibilities of a professional body. So we have EXA as the professional body, but you are all, some of you are engineers, so you know what the structure of EXA is. They've got Saimeki, the mechanical engineers, as a separate entity. They've got the electrical engineers, the civil engineers. Now these are not professional bodies. They have professional body status by virtue of being associated with EXA. So they formally associate with EXA, and as such, they have the ability to facilitate the same benefits, advantages, etc., to their respective members. And they all eventually pay their membership fee to EXA. So similarly, I envisage this entity to have at its core the defined mandate, which covers the broad spectrum of RECP professions, but then, similar to EXA, organize themselves into different chambers, one for energy service companies, one for water efficiency, one for materials and waste, etc., etc. So that each one of these focus areas or thematic areas or specialization areas have the ability to understand, being a practitioner in the energy space means that you understand what it is that is needed in terms of your areas of specialization. You need to have understanding of what it is that your prospective clients need. And as such, you structure yourself and you develop regimes according to which you guide the growth and the professionalization of this profession. So I envisage different chambers focusing on specific thematic areas as a possibility to be confirmed and discussed amongst yourselves and structured according to how you see fit. So the case for a professional body, one of the most important responsibilities, in my opinion, of a professional body is the legal mandate to develop and award professional designations. In South Africa, no other entity has that ability. It's only a professional body that can formally develop and award professional designations. We sit in an environment, as I implied in my first few slides, where government has certain expectations for legislation to be rolled out smoothly and efficiently. We have expectations from industry to have access to qualified, and when I say qualified, read certified practitioners that can do what they are supposed to do in order for industry to comply to government legislation. So the awarding of professional designations becomes very significant because it will eventually give industry the confidence that when they approach ESCO A or person B to perform a particular role or job within that organization, that this person is duly qualified and certified to be able to do that job. So that's the significance of professional designations. It is a guarantee to the beneficiary of those services that those services will be performed according to established standards of practice and codes of conduct. Recognition of training courses is another very important responsibility of professional body. One that is not restricted by issues around accreditation, NQF levels, credits being awarded to learners. The professional body has the responsibility to identify training courses or training material or learning outcomes that serves the profession. So they recognize the skills that gets transferred in a particular training event, regardless of whether those skills are being taught within the formal education and training environment, meaning that it results in a formal qualification or not. As we know, we live in a high-tech environment. Many skills get taught in, I don't necessarily like the term, but let's call them informal training. But they remain valuable skills needed by industry. So how do we recognize that? A professional body has the authority to recognize those trainings through continuous professional development. So they are not restricted to only recognize SAQA registered qualifications and courses that are accredited, or training providers that are accredited through the structure that exists. Another responsibility that a professional body is allowed to pursue is the development of new qualifications that gets registered on the National Qualifications Framework, either through the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations or any of the other quality councils within the SAQA structure. So a professional body can apply to be recognized as a qualification development entity, and they can pursue the development of qualifications that they understand and recognize as necessary for their members. And they can react very quickly, unlike what we experience with sector education and training authorities, to have these initiatives launched for the development of qualifications. They're still reliant on the existing SAQA and QCTO structures to get the process finalized, but they can play a role to fast-track the development of new qualifications. A very critical role also, in my opinion, would be for the professional body to establish formal links with international bodies of similar nature. Now, there are similar bodies in Japan, in Malaysia, and in many other countries in the world. And the formal liaison with these entities will further add credibility to the South African practitioners who are members of this professional body, because there will be agreements amongst these international agencies that once this particular body has awarded a specific professional designation to a practitioner, that designation will be recognized and respected in other countries. It opens the borders. We have a responsibility as South Africans also to our neighboring states and our continent. So by being able to claim local certified designations and add that to your professional credentials will most certainly open up doors elsewhere in the world. The other factors I've touched on briefly already: eliminate reputational risk to qualified practitioners, increased standing and credibility and status of practitioners, and building trust amongst clients. I've heard so many of you in personal conversations with me stating that you get frustrated because you walk onto a plant. A prospective client tells you, man, leave. 2 weeks ago, I had somebody here that walked through and claimed all these preposterous savings and they disappeared. I don't believe you guys anymore, please. So really, I believe that membership and eventual awarding of professional designations will get rid of that prejudice amongst your future clients and will give you the added credibility that you need to secure business. So where are we? We need to establish a suitable entity, which means the very next step would be to form a working committee of volunteers from amongst yourselves that will take the responsibility to guide the administrative, logistical, and managerial responsibilities to give life to this entity. We need to register a non-profit organization as a first step. We need to develop a constitution that is suitable to you as the potential beneficiaries from this organization. You must take ownership of this. You must be the masters of your own destiny, professionally speaking. You cannot afford to leave it to others who do not understand your world of work. We need to establish a working committee, I call it a board here, of volunteers and teams taking responsibility to commit their own time and resources to make these things happen. The NCPC's role, having initiated this drive, is to make resources available in the form of myself and my team, to assist and aid the process, to handle much of the administrative and logistical requirements that we can, to support the momentum of seeing this achieved. So I will be working very closely with whoever it is that you appoint and that you have confidence in to task with certain responsibilities. Then every single one needs to take responsibility to drive recruitment and encourage your colleagues and people from your network to join this movement and participate. The importance of that lies in the fact that after having operated efficiently for a number of months and having built a reputation that this is an entity that can perform the typical roles and responsibilities of a professional body. That evidence is then taken to SAQA when we apply for SAQA to register us as a professional body. So we must prove efficiency, productivity, and the fact that we can sustain this. SAQA will not register a professional body if the likelihood is that in 2 years' time they won't exist anymore. And the scope, the range of specializations that I envisage could be part of this professional body means that conservative estimates is that we are likely to very quickly, in terms of membership numbers, become one of the biggest professional bodies in this country. Purely by the potential number of members. If you think about energy practitioners alone, it would guarantee sustainability. If you add to that all the other RECP disciplines, then there's no question. So a hypothetical relationship diagram, because I want to also address the concern that there might be of overlapping with responsibilities of existing associations. And mind you, please make a clear distinction between what a professional body is and what a sector association or a voluntary association is. A voluntary association does not have the legal mandate to do what the professional body does. However, there are a number of associations doing extremely valuable work this broader area of RECP. I'm thinking of the Waste Institute, Plastics SA, the SAEEC, many of them. We don't want to rob them of their mandate. We want to extend and open our arms and say, join us so that we can facilitate more power and more authority to what you are already doing. We don't want to replace you. We want to augment what you are already doing. We don't want to swallow you. We want you to carry on the way you are and grow according to whatever strategy you have in place. We don't want to infringe on your mandate or steal your members. But by affiliating to the registered professional body, you will be awarded so many more benefits for your members that they can capitalize on. So we want to embrace existing associations, and we will go on a drive to meet with them, identify them, and speak to all of them to allay these fears that they may have and that may cause them to want to oppose this drive. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to take over the roles of existing entities. We recognize and respect the role that they are currently playing, and we want to keep doing that. The financial sustainability, we have conducted a little research and drafted a business plan and a business case for the establishment of a professional body. And based on the research that we've done, interviews that we've had with existing professional bodies, it indicates that once we reach a membership target of just over 3,000, this entity will be self-sustainable in terms of setting up its own infrastructure, even going to the point of appointing full-time employees to perform the functions that they are supposed to. So the typical income streams would be membership subscriptions. I've got new lips. Membership subscriptions. No, I'm fine. And now I can already hear a sigh, but I'm already paying so much to EXA or so much to this and the other, and now another one. Again, let me remind you, this entity will be governed by you. You will decide how to administer something like membership fees. If you embrace existing associations where membership is already paid there, and you feel it is a little bit steep to expect the members of those associations to also now pay membership here, then an arrangement could be reached according to which the association pays an affiliation fee to this entity. For example, there are many models that the working committee can investigate, propose, and you guys decide in the end what is most appropriate and what do you think is reasonable. So registration fees on joining could be a source of revenue, fees for events, conferences, etc., workshops. One thing that must be borne in mind, a professional body can never be a training provider. A professional body is one step above that. They recognize training providers. And I'm carefully avoiding to call it accreditation because accreditation implies something else. But they can recognize particular training providers. They can issue a range of expectations that a particular training provider must comply with in order to be recognized, etc., etc. They can provide guidelines to training providers in terms of what kind of training courses to develop, what are the latest technologies and methodologies that needs to be formulated in a learning outcomes environment, and developed into training courses. So the professional body is one step above a training provider. But for training providers to be recognized, there's a fee involved, or there could be a fee involved. So that is another possible revenue stream. And then fees for services like accreditation, etc. And I put accreditation because it's a familiar term, but I would advise that we consider other terminologies. Expenditure streams, typical human resources, utilities and logistics, publicity and recruitment. So in summary, the legislative environment, the industry and the country needs to address these, and we need the right skills and quality skills to execute legislation and realize the expectations of government. The professional benefits, I think I've said enough about that. And to establish this and sustain the entity, we now need to generate momentum, gather enthusiastic support from amongst professionals across the country. So once this working committee has been selected and achieved the first few deliverables, as part of the process, we intend to undertake a roadshow to make sure that we meet stakeholders across the country, in every province, in every major industrial area, to make sure that everybody is enlightened, informed, and has a say in what is going to happen going forward. So that is my story.